If you get injured, are you better off returning to work right away and just fighting through it, or are you better taking the time to actually sit back, rest, and heal? I'm Dr. Jeff Cumro, and over the past 15 years, I've been blessed to work with over 5,000 patients. And in that time, I've learned a little bit of stuff, right? We've seen some patterns in different things, and that's ultimately what we're going to review today is, are you better off getting right back to work, or are you better off taking that time to heal? And this kind of sparked by some research done by Gozzard and his research partners back in 2001. And what they're looking at is whiplash. But in my experience, it doesn't matter if we're looking at whiplash, if we're looking at lower back spasms, if we're looking at some other kind of injury. So in this study, they took those people that had whiplash and they just interviewed them. And they found out that people who are self-employed are more likely to go back to work, right? Their paycheck or livelihood depends on it. They can't, sit back and collect a paycheck while they're recovering, right? So if they don't do the work, they don't get paid. So they go back to work more quickly. And what this research showed is those that sat back and recovered in 30 days. Those that did not took 153 days. And that's just on average, right? So some of them were shorter, some were longer, but that was the average return to work, or return to full functionality rather. So we're going to dive into what leads to this, right? So should you go back to work? Should you not go back to work? And we're not just going to base it off the number of days off on that. So when we go back to work, one of the benefits of that is we get movement, right? Movement is a good thing. Movement is something that allows us to heal. In the short term, sometimes it is better to take it easy just for a couple of days, but the pain is not our guide on that. The common phrase is let your pain be your guide. And that's really not the best way to look at this, because if we move through a range of motion, as long as it's not causing injury, it's probably going to help us get better. The reason for that is we're increasing our range of motion. We're getting those muscles loosened up. We're lubricating those joints. We're bringing blood flow back to the area. We're doing all of these things that are going to help to improve the healing of that area that's involved with this. So it's probably a good thing to get moving earlier. But is it better to get back to work? Sometimes when we go back to work, we're getting ourselves into positions that are actually injuring us further. And there's a big difference between those two, right? Something that is uncomfortable versus something that is actually injurious, right? We don't want to put ourselves in those situations where we're actually leading to injury. Being uncomfortable, totally different animal. Other aspects of this is, are we moving to the point of fatigue? Because if we're getting to that point of fatigue, we don't have that energy to heal. And so there is an element of that in there as well. Moving on to the next point, which is that giving ourselves the energy to heal. Ultimately healing comes down to having the energy to actually do the work that's needed to get ourselves better. So my energy or evaluation of how you're going to get better or not, how much energy do you produce, how much energy do you expend, equals how much energy you have left over to heal, repair, do the things that you want to do, right? So if we're not making enough energy, that's something we have to address. But when we're going through a healing process, the bigger problem here is we are expending too much energy, right? It takes a lot of energy. If you've been sick, you realize that the reason you want to go and lay down, it takes a lot of energy to heal. So we have that immune system, we have that inflammatory system, we have all these different systems that are going through, and they need the energy to get everything back to normal. The faster we can do that, the better off we're going to be. But we have to have energy left over at the end of the day to actually get some of that stuff accomplished in a reasonable manner. So if we're going through and we produce the same amount of energy, we expend more energy going to work and doing these other things, we don't have as much energy to dedicate to healing. Healing is likely to take longer. So you're probably held back a little bit on that. So in that case, staying off of work is probably going to be a better scenario for you. Other things that are involved in this, drinking plenty of water. I know a lot of people that don't drink water when they go to work because they don't want to go to the bathroom all the time. It's a real concern. This is really things that get brought up when I recommend people drink more water. That hydration is very, very important though, because that hydration, if you look at us, we are energetic beings, right? We produce energy. How do we get that energy to other parts of the body? You have to have water to transport it, right? That's the easiest way of looking at this. If you are dehydrated, it slows down that healing process. So if you've got somebody over here that's trying to do a bunch of work and they don't want to take the time to stop and go to the bathroom every hour and all that stuff, then that's going to slow down healing versus somebody that's over here that can optimize their water intake, they can optimize nutrition, all that other stuff. That's the other aspect of this is nutrition. You know, when you're at home, you could cook healthier meals, different things like that. Depending on what kind of work you do, might be a little bit more likely to grab, you know, some quick food and just do whatever you need to do to get through your day versus being at home, being able to cook a good, healthy, solid meal. So when we look at all of this stuff, it really starts leaning toward we're probably better off to stay home. However, like I said, the one aspect that kind of weighs in the form of work is movement. We've got to have movement in there. A lot of people sit back, they relax. They don't want to get that mobility in there. And that's a lot of what chiropractic healing is based off of is getting back the mobility that you've lost. So when you come into a chiropractor, when you go through some of the stretching and yoga and different things like that that are going to allow you to move better, it allows you to heal better. It allows the sensory systems to send better signals. It allows, you know, that inflammation to decrease, because if we don't move, we have inflammation immediately. So there's a lot of increase in these other things. So if you're at home, don't just sit around. Every 20, 30 minutes, get up and move around. Allow your body that exercise that it really needs and it craves to actually get better. And that's the big thing that I can tell you. And I should note that, you know, if you're looking at that and you're saying, oh, well, chiropractic and stretching and mobility are the same, they're not the same thing. When we look at chiropractic, we're instilling motion into a joint that is not moving. If we do like stretching yoga, a lot of times those joints will not move the way that they're supposed to. They're still fixated, and we have to get that motion in there. The faster that we could get that motion back in there, the less inflammatory response you're going to have. So as always, if you have questions on this, drop me a message, like or subscribe to the channel. I do appreciate your time and attention. I know that's your greatest resource. I appreciate you spending some of that with me, and I'll look forward to seeing you on next week's video.